just didn't take off because David Lynch was such a visionary director. Most people didn't get what he was trying to say. But it's a beautiful film to watch in a sense. You look at all those sets and you're like, it's right there, every bit of it.
Yes.
Well, to go back to a question that was asked earlier concerning the popularity of steampunk, why now? It's possible that some of it has to do with the fact that it is analog technology, in that you can kind of understand when you look at it, you have gears and you have all these other things, and you can kind of figure out how it works. If you took apart your cell phone, could you figure out how it works? Probably not. But might be able to figure out, well, you can figure out how a watch works by taking it apart. And that may be some of what's driving this, a nostalgia for machines that you can actually understand how they function.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a very good point. Charles Babbage was a mathematician by trade. He wasn't a computers didn't exist. And yet he came up with basically the very first computer. And Joseph Marie Jacquard, who created the Jacquard loom, wasn't a scientist. He was in textiles. His family had always owned a weaving business. He figured out how to make it run on punch cards, how to write computer programs. And that's a very good point. With Victorian mechanical technology, you can be a smart, mechanically inclined person and not really need any specialized technology, any specialized training to figure it out. Like now I can't walk into a nuclear power plant and know immediately which buttons to push without causing a meltdown. You need the training. I can, however, look at a watch and generally figure out how to take it apart and put it back together so it works again.
Do you think that's one reason why a lot of authors have included steampunk type things in their works, is that they don't have to do a ton of research to figure it out? They can write something kind of off the cuff with some basic mechanical knowledge and make it understandable and believable to a reader.
It's a lot easier than hard science fiction to write in terms of the science of it. Yes?
Yeah, I think there's a whole other aspect here, a cohesion or parallel with the maker movement.
Yes.
People who love to make things. You were talking about disappearing art, but there's kind of a grassroots movement for homemade technology, which is sort of an art thing. It's creative. And those guys have really embraced steampunk, because we've got them in the vendor's room. It's stuff you can make yourself.
Yes. In the back.
I believe that a lot of the stuff we're doing, steampunk is basically re-embracing technology that we've shown because of the cheaper, inexpensive oil and gas out there. But if you look at the Club of Rome analysis and stuff like that, where oil and gas disappeared, guess what? You're back into an age where you're using wood, biofuels, and whatever to make steam to propel cars, airplanes, boats, whatever.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting you bring up steam powering cars, because we could have had steam powered cars, but Abner Doble was a perfectionist in the 1930s. He never actually. There are Doble Model E cars that exist today that were built in the 1930s, and they still pass modern emissions checks regularly. They're like perfect. They're perfect on that record.
There's one item that's appearing now, is that gas-powered power boat, like a Chris Craig. Right now, to run that same boat is $400, $500 a trip. The same fuel expenditure with a steam system is half that. So it looks like the financial situation is going to dictate that we're going to see a lot more steam-powered boats than gas-powered boats, simply because the cost of fuel is going way outside.
Yeah.
Unless you want to sail.
There's that too.
Wind is always free.
Let's see. We have 15 minutes left in my appointed time slot. Does anyone have any further questions about the presentation or anything else they want to mention? Yes.
Well, it's interesting. There's a lot of steam going on in our daily lives that we don't even know about. Nuclear power plants. It's all this fancy atomic stuff, but it boils water.
Yeah.
And right here in Greenville, we have a GE turbine plant. It's a steam turbine. And you can tell when they're testing their turbines because there's a huge cloud of steam coming out. So steam's not dead yet.
No, it's more industrial and less consumer
Yes.
right now than anything. That's the primary difference between us and the Victorians in terms of where we use the steam technology now. Yes.
Do you think windmills is a reinvention? I mean, like, do you see that being some of the things that, with the gears and all this stuff and the pedal spinning? I mean, is that going to be reinvention of steam?
I would say yes, because a lot of the mills, because like mill technology throughout the centuries, grinding flour to make bread, has always been wind powered. Now just basically taking it and adapting it to our current electronics. Yes, it may look pretty and be plastic and sleek as opposed to the hand carved, put together maker version that Steampunk would have, but it is very much still that making use of what you have around you. We always have wind, why not make money off of it? That's a very sort of steampunk thing to do.
There's a whole other couple of different sides we haven't even talked about, but you know, you think about the era of which steampunk is all about. It occurs when the Industrial Revolution has just taken off. And so much degradation, so many of the problems that we associate with today have direct influences in the start of that era. So even though that steampunk has a certain feel and has certain ideas, motives, it has different themes it follows, I don't always know that it kind of has its roots in the in that industrial age. You know, I don't know if anybody else has really noticed that. You know,
Well, Egyptians have steam.
Yes.
Right, right. I'm just saying though is so much of what steampunk borrows from actually comes out of the Victorian era, which was very much about the Industrial Revolution. You know, so how they lived, what they did was as a result of having all of that, you know, the fancy dresses and all that kind of stuff that you were seeing of the late 1800s, early 1900s, were a direct influence of the Industrial Revolution. We no longer had to have less people doing, more work was being done with less people. And yet those people that we put them to work, we didn't have to have them as skilled, and we just used people. So, and those kind of things do come up in some of the steampunk novels.
Yeah.
Certainly, and same with some of the other genres that you talked about. So, but that was something that I caught on. And I don't know, I haven't read a lot of steampunk novels, but I'm just wondering, besides from literature, I kind of mentioned media, do you think there's movies, TV programs that steampunk is borrowed from? I know that we've gotten many programs that, you know, Firefly and that have borrowed from the steampunk genre. But I don't know if there's others earlier that steampunk is, but has been. I think it's been more primarily driven by previous genres.
It's been primarily driven by literature more than I think, at least in the beginning parts of it, the very beginnings of like the very first works that can be considered steampunk, like Moorcock's Nomad of the Time Streams series, Harry Harrison's A Transatlantic Tunnel, Hurrah. Those ended up drawing more from the literary side of things. And the movies and the TV shows would come later simply because they developed later. I think you might have I believe it was the 60s, the old Wild Wild West TV show. That can be considered kind of a film route of steampunk that some of the authors of today might have seen and be drawing from. That ties things more over into the Weird West side of the genre rather than what has been considered traditional first world steampunk of setting it in the United States of the late 1800s or in Victorian London. I mean, definitely things are changing now because there's a lot more non-European steampunk going on that's drawing from other roots rather than just this literature. But this has been like the earliest roots that exist that I've found as of yet. I'm sure there's other more esoteric things out there that I haven't discovered.